Okay, are we good? Yeah, Lee is in there too. I think I saw all 5 board members.
Good evening. I'd like to call the
Whose volume? This volume is on. Are we on? TV should be on. That's the
Bob,
only-
you should mute. Yeah,
No, I'm muted.
and now it's okay.
Okay, one.
Okay.
Okay, good evening. I'd like to welcome everybody and call the meeting to order. Start with roll call. Trustee Andrade Zuniga,
Present.
Trustee Land,
Present.
Trustees Lees Dwyer. And I think it was a Trustee Hanley.
Muted, present.
Okay. And
Sorry.
I'm here. We have all 5 board members, like staff is here, and I'm going to ask the superintendent if he would lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, sir. Okay, we have our Spanish interpreter this evening, Mr. Montaldo. For those who would like to attend the meeting with the Spanish option, Mr. Montaldo, if you would please communicate that when we open up the interpreter room.
Absolutely.
Okay. Por favor.
Por supuesto.
Is the room open?
I can't see the icon here.
Do you want to make the announcement now?
Ok, sure. Buenas tardes. Si ustedes están escuchándome es porque están asistiendo a la asamblea, a la reunión del directorio del Distrito Escolar Unificado de San Mateo. En breves instantes podrán acceder al canal de español a través del cual podrán escuchar las diferentes presentaciones de hoy. Muchas gracias.
Thank you. Okay, if you wish to view closed captions of this meeting, please view the meeting on the San Mateo Union High School Board Meeting YouTube channel. The link to the YouTube channel can be found on our district website. You may view the captions in English as we live stream our meeting tonight. You may view the captions in a variety of other languages if you choose to watch after the meeting has ended. Viewers may request additional accommodations by calling 650-558-2201. at 650-558-2201. Okay, and a report from closed session. The board approved an exclusive negotiating agreement with Summer Hill Homes LLC regarding the Crestmore site located at 300 Piedmont Avenue in San Bruno, California. The agreement provides that Summer Hill shall pay the district a non-refundable deposit in exchange for the district agreeing not to negotiate with any other party for the sale of Crestmore site for a period of 60 days. The agreement was approved by a vote of 5-0. Okay, and now I'm going to ask that everyone to join me as we observe a moment of silence for the 12 U.S. service members killed in Afghanistan today, including 11 U.S. Marines and 1 Navy corpsman following explosions outside of the airport in Kabul. Please join me in a moment of silence to honor the loss of service members and others killed in those attacks.
After that, nobody has more than 36. So 47 saves, a lot of saves. Still in August. Got him to chase. Wilmer went out to the high fastball. Shot it up.
Thank you. Okay, this is a public meeting of the San Mateo Union High School District Board of Trustees. If you wish to make a comment about an agenda item or during the public comment section at the beginning of the agenda, please send an email to comments@smuhsd.org. That's comments@smuhsd.org with your name, email address, and your Zoom name, if different, and the item under which you would like to comment. The board president will call on you. Please note that comments are limited to 3 minutes. The board president may increase or decrease the time allowed for public presentations, depending on the topic and the number of persons wishing to be heard. Okay, I think that's all the intros and legal languages and T's and C's. Are there any public comments at this point?
We do have one public comment from Alexander Guess, and he's been promoted.
Okay, Mr. Guest. Or Alexander Guest, please.
Sure. So thank you for your time. My name is Alexander Guess. I had spoken at the last district meeting. Once again, I'm here to make my case for why we must integrate community college courses as an alternative to AP available to students. And I understand that there may be some existing pessimism directed at me because I mentioned before that I'm a senior. But although I may be a senior, I'm not here to attempt to buff out my resume for college. I'm here because I genuinely believe this is a case to be made that'll genuinely improve the quality of the lives for the students on campus. For perspective, I'd like to take a bit of a different approach than I did last meeting. And so prior, I had simply gone formal debate. I had said pros, cons, this is why pros are better. So instead, I'd like to reference what I've done, how I've utilized community college courses. So in this, I've met just an incredible amount of institutional and financial barriers. Say financial aid has been non-existent for me. And college courses are quite expensive. And for the longest period of time as well, I've either had counselors or administrators attempt to dissuade me from taking courses. So I've more or less had to treat these college courses as an addendum to my high school schedule. Instead of, say, taking 6 courses and 2 college courses as those 2 college courses being contributed to those that high school schedule, they are something separate entirely. It's not as though I'm taking 8 courses, as though I'm taking 6 an additional 2. And they're just so terribly integrated into our system. I'm not getting accredited for my extra work that I'm doing. And so now, despite this, and with an egregious amount of planning and effort that I've had no support with, I have reaped enough credit to obtain my associate's degree by the end of next semester, by the end of my senior year. This means that in effect, I've either saved tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars, and I've effectively cut down 2 years of my college costs and time. Now, I'm confident that the board will pursue this because sometime I had presented a much more starry-eyed version of what I plan to present to the PTSO board, and they responded overwhelmingly favorable to my Aragon PTSO board. Now, this is not the same package. I've worked with the curriculum board, with Ms. Kemke and Mr. Simmons, and I've been incredibly grateful for that. So these are the points I'd like to make and that I believe are genuinely going to improve the quality of lives for our students. So the graduation coursework that students may take at SMCCD or an external institution being increased from, say, something like 40 to something like 80, just a considerable size increase. And so given that our district requirements are much more stricter than legal state requirements, my suggestion would almost be to investigate which courses we could almost test out with students. So say instead of a student being forced, if they're looking for calculus their junior or senior year, say allowing them a little bit of freedom and saying taking a calculus 1, a calculus 2, in supplication of that AP calculus course. And finally, I'd like to see I'd like to see needy students' ability to attend SMCCD just greatly enhanced. The 11 free units per semester are exhausted very quickly. I've spent so much money this semester alone, and it's a barrier to entry that we can really resolve. We can completely cover the cost of any student who would normally say qualify for free or reduced lunch. And so finally, uniformity in practice. The efforts that the board has taken so far have trickled down very, very slowly to our day-to-day approaches and our day-to-day operations. I've actually very recently I've spent more than a handful of minutes having a debate with my counselor as to whether or not prior district policy passing and prior district substance, say the GPA boost that was supposed to go into my GPA, whether that was an actual proposal. And so I had to show her the policy proving that it was and that I could get the grade bump, which is quite frustrating to someone like me, as I want to be qualified for the work I do. And so with that, I hope that I've made a reasonable case with a little bit more in practice effects. And with that, I yield my time to the chair. And I thank you all very much for your time.
Thank you for your comments. I'm going to call on the superintendent.
Yeah, so Alexander, I know you've had some conversations with Dr. Kemke. I'm going to ask that you circle back and you two have some more conversations, and then Dr. Kemke will report back to the board, and then we'll take this up in subsequent reports to the board. Okay?
Okay. Governing board comments. Are there any? Trustee Hanley, you have a comment.
Yes. Well, as I said last time with Mr. Guest, I would be interested in pursuing his ideas, and that's a topic that I've raised a number of times over the years, that I'd like to see more openings for college classes for our students. I think the AP program is a very 20th century program. I think it's outdated for the 21st century, and particularly in an urban area like we are, where we have community colleges sitting practically right on our steps. So I'm very interested in continuing those discussions, which I've advocated for a number of years. So that's the first thing. And I would like to thank the superintendent for spending time today with me. And we went around and visited Peninsula and Mills and Cap. And I think had a very good tour. We spent actually quite a bit of time in classrooms today, and got a good variety of different classes. Got a chance to talk to the principals, and I want to try to get to the other schools in September when I have another chance to spend some time. The other thing I would like to propose today, and I'd like the administration to take a look at for our next meeting, is I think we need to take some steps to further encourage people to get vaccinated. And I think one of those steps is that unvaccinated students really shouldn't be participating in extracurricular activities anymore. And I say that because the warnings about the seriousness of the Delta virus and the contagiousness of this virus really is, it's not a question of if people are going to get sick, it's when they're going to get sick if they're not vaccinated. And, students have a constitutional right to an education, but they don't have a constitutional right to play football or basketball or be in plays or robotics or any of those. So I think I would like the administration to take a look at this and come back to us at the next meeting, if possible, with a proposal that would limit those activities really to students that are vaccinated. Because I think the unvaccinated students just present a clear and present danger to the staff and a clear and present danger to other students, and could shut down those activities virtually if we get a lot of sick students all of a sudden in any of those activities. So I would very much like to have that analyzed and brought back to the board at the next meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other board comments? Trustee Lees Dwyer.
Okay, am I on? I'm on, okay. I also went on a tour with Mr. Skelly there last week and went to Peninsula Cap Mills. We even made it to Burlingame, and I think that's because we didn't spend that much time in classrooms. But I'm glad that we're all getting toured around, because I think we should be out and about as much as we can. We should see real life and see what's going on, and experience the campuses. And I think it's really important to what we do. So I really appreciate it too. Mr. Guest, I think I agree with Peter. And I would say that the comment on AP, it's definitely, AP is a one size fits all. I had 4 children do AP classes. None of them are one size fits all children, many different levels of success. Some of them would have been much better off if they'd been able to take a college course versus an AP class. So, and nothing against the teachers who teach that at all. But I think that we need to really look at expanding things. And maybe the teacher could actually teach the college course. I would also like that we consider looking at the middle college program as part of that analysis, because we are doing a lot of things there, and I don't want to lose that. I'd rather see we expand on that. Lastly, football is starting Friday night, Mr. Hanley, and a lot of the schools are playing. It was in the Daily Journal today. Go Daily Journal. Burlingame and Cap will be fighting it out at home. So I'm hoping to get that CCS card so that we can go see that game, and maybe I'll join Mr. Skelly there or someone else. But it's kind of exciting to get to see the students go back to participating in sports, participating in cheerleading, participating in band, all of those things that really enrich your life as a student, and the curriculum. Thank you.
Any other comments from the board? Don't see you.
Ligia.
Oh,
Ligia.
sorry, I was looking for a hand in the.
Yeah, we don't have access to the reactions at the bottom of the screen.
Go at the lines where it says more. It's
Yeah,
there.
I don't have it online at all.
Don't you have 3 little dots
No, nothing.
next to the globe? Oh,
Nope.
okay.
Yeah, it's weird. I know. Well, I wanted to acknowledge that we're on Ramitush Aloni land. And I wanted to also piggyback on what Peter was saying on Trustee Hanley. Yes, please get vaccinated. He's absolutely right. This is super contagious. Recently, we just had a good friend pass away from the variant, and she had been vaccinated. And she got it from somebody else who came over to her house that unfortunately was not vaccinated. So it poses such a threat to everyone, vaccinated or not vaccinated. And the vaccinated, we could still carry it around. So we really need to make sure that, especially our young people, I mean, that's why we're all here, is to protect them and to support them. And so we really need to create resources and pathways for them to be successful. And that's one way. So please, and we don't want any of our staff to get sick or our teachers. It's just, it's not fair. So please get vaccinated. There are plenty of ways to do so. And the district has opened up different places to do that. So I believe today there were a couple of sites that had that available. I also wanted to mention that there is a organization called Yo Disabled and Proud. It's a youth organization for students with disabilities, and they've been having a really awesome speaker series. They had someone on Tuesday that works for NASA, and she has a disability, and she was speaking to this particular group of people. And if anyone's interested, they're having a regular speaker series. So if you could go online and search for Yo Disabled and Proud for our students with disabilities or not, they're really good. It's a really good series. But I also just wanted to reiterate what Trustee Griffin said about accessibility. If anybody needs access, whether it be captioning, ASL, translated documents, or translation in different languages, please let us know. That is very, very important. So thank you. That's it.
Okay, any other comments? If not, we will move on to the consent agenda.
I move approval.
Second.
Why? Okay, any questions or comments? If not, we'll take a vote.
I read every contract in case, and there were way too many little contracts on there, but I went through all of them and I had a couple questions and they were answered. So thank you.
Okay.
I just have a comment about that. Whoever puts that together, it's like so well put together, and it was really easy to follow. And I'm beginning to get to know a lot more vendors and things that we use. So thank you. It's awesome the way that it's organized.
I believe Shar Aquino gets the credit for that.
Yay! No, it's awesome.
Go, Shar.
She works hard. And I guess we ought to give Trustees Lee's Dwyer credit, since she just drilled down to the very, very, very bottom of it. So we appreciate everybody's diligence. So Trustee Andrade Zuniga, how do you vote on it?
I vote yes.
Trustee Land?
Yes. Thank you, Shar.
Trustee Lee's Dwyer?
Yes.
Trustee Hanley?
Yes.
And I'll vote yes. And the consent agenda will pass 5-0, and we will move on to K1, I believe, report of the superintendent.
Thank you very much. Today is day 11. Last time we were here was day 1. The sheen of the year has not come off. It's wonderful to be out and seeing kids and seeing learning and, seeing the energy. I have to say, some of the district office staff and I were talking that, we get to deal with COVID and, issues and things like that. And all the action and the fun is at the sites. So this year, I'm really trying to get out and gather some of that energy. It's just been so wonderful to see students, and I appreciate the board members giving me a context for that. And I'll say that today when Mr. Hanley and I were traveling, teachers would say, "Oh, you're here. Can you just stay for 10 minutes? I'm doing this really fantastic activity." And it was really, they were right. And I was so glad they encouraged us, but it meant that we didn't get to go as far. But I promise Ms. Lees Dwyer that next week when we travel, we'll spend more time in classes and seeing folks. Let's see. We have a tentative agreement with our teachers union. That agreement was the product of negotiations from district administrators as well as the teachers. We're really pleased that we were able to come to that agreement. We'll be bringing that, the legislative council has approved it. It's been tentative, it's been signed. Now we have to go through a whole bunch of processes. We'll bring it back to you for approval, but we're really pleased that we're able to work in a district where we work together to solve problems. Next Thursday is back to school night. We have decided, given the raging pandemic we're still experiencing, that back to school night will be done virtually, similar to what it was done last year. That I think was very successful. And even if we would have loved to see the parents there, but we think it's the right way to go, and our teachers will do a very good job. And in some ways, it provides greater accessibility to families if we could do it virtually. I've been attending a bunch of parent meetings. Some of those have been virtual. Some of the PTOs have had activities in person. It's wonderful to see the parents too come to campus. At each of the schools, as I talk, each of our principals, the PTO presidents, are making a big focus on rebuilding and building community. So we're looking forward to that, to more activities with parents. Speaking of building community, we're organizing a Giants game for staff members who would like to come. We've reserved a section, and folks can go online, pick up a ticket, bring their family and friends. It's September 18th against the Braves. And so board members and your significant others or family members are certainly welcome to join us. In terms of vaccines and testing, as you know, the governor passed an expectation that staff members would be vaccinated or that they be tested. That mandate goes into effect in October. This week on Monday, we built that expectation for staff. We did have some people who, once they got that expectation, signed up and have received the first dose. We've been scrubbing our data, and our estimate is about 97% of our staff are now vaccinated. We've given you data that was like 89 or 87. So 97 is getting close to everybody, and we're going to continue to test every week. Our goal right after Labor Day is to begin testing all unvaccinated students and then expand outward from there. We know we need to do more to have that happen. On Friday, tomorrow, we will be offering COVID vaccinations at Cappuccino and Hillsdale, both schools. And we've called all the families who've expressed interest in receiving that. We've had our family engagement coordinators do that work. So we're hoping that many people show up for that event tomorrow. So we appreciate folks' work on that. So off to a great start. The energy is really good. You heard from the principals last time. As I go and visit them, they haven't changed their mind. They're still loving being back in person. So thank you, board, for your support, and on we go.
Thank you. Do we have a student board member yet?
Nope, not yet.
Okay. Report of District Teachers Association.
President Griffin, members of the board, and district cabinet. First, I want to again recognize the board and the district for moving toward trustee area elections. This change is not only long overdue, but also clearly in line with the district's focus on equity and representation. We truly look forward to this process. I'll also comment, as Dr. Skelly did, on the tentative agreement that was reached between the association and the district. There were quite a few meetings, quite a few back and forths. And as anyone, any good negotiator will tell you, and Trustee Lees-Dwyer has often said this, that any good agreement usually leaves everyone dissatisfied. And so I think we're headed in the right direction. We did bring the agreement to our legislative council this week, and it was approved for a membership vote. That process will ensue shortly. and we should have it before you very soon. So we do appreciate the work of both the districts and the association's bargaining teams and the support of the board in moving forward with this agreement. In the process of, and I'll shift to the start of school. In the process of grading student work, the discussion often involves a discussion of standards. Rubrics often include benchmarks of achievement, such as approaching the standard, meeting the standard, and or exceeding the standard. While we seem to be meeting the standard of a relatively smooth opening to the school year, considering the circumstances, we're clearly not meeting the standard of universal safety protocols. Simply stated, we can do better. Again, a smooth opening, but we're hearing far too many reports of crowded indoor meetings, lack of masking, both with students and employees, lack of enforcement of rules, and inconsistent responses or protocols for contact tracing and isolation. We can do better. We can offer testing to any student or employee, regardless of exposure or vaccination status. We have the resources to test everyone regularly. We do. We could conduct weekly pool testing similar to the description of Trustee Land in his district and what's going to happen in the San Mateo Foster City School District after Labor Day. We can do better. The community deserves our best effort. Some may say that we do not have the staffing. Some may say we don't have the funding. We have the support from the state. We have an extraordinary reserve, or quote, rainy day fund. Despite the nature of climate change in our own daily lives, we're indeed in the middle of a pretty bad rainy day. School outbreaks in Santa Clara, Sacramento, other surrounding counties, and right here in San Mateo Foster City, there's no excuse for not meeting the standard. Some would also say that we're meeting the requirements of the guidance. We don't need to do any more, and we shouldn't. As we all know, however, throughout this pandemic, the guidance has often lagged behind the virus by weeks, if not months. To be clear, we should be demanding the same from our district as we do from our students. We need to raise the bar. We should be exceeding the standard. Why not do more than what is required? Why not be the ones who champion the efforts? Why not do everything to keep kids safe? The last thing I'll mention is that what we're hearing from the sites, and this is just the most recent thing, is that many of the infractions, many of the concerns are not going, they're not being reported, they're not going enforced, and people, there seems to be this acknowledgement of varying levels of comfort. There is no room for that. We can't allow it, parents won't allow it, and we can't accept it. We need to do everything in our power to keep kids safe. We need to exceed the standard. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to call on the superintendent here again before we move on.
Yeah, my apologies. This is staff guided me through this, and then I dropped the ball here. We have just a couple of slides here that I'm going to ask Mr. Hawkins to describe, and then also a slide about the ribbon cutting next week. So if we can call that up, do you have it? Okay, so we have Mr. Hawkins, if you could just walk us through the sports complex update slides, that would be great. You can go to the next slide.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dr. Skelly. So want to first extend my gratitude to the voters and taxpayers for their support of Measure L, without which none of these projects would be possible. We've got really exciting projects right now, sports complexes at both Mills and Cap. And right now, here's the rendering for the project at Mills. At Mills, this project includes the construction of new tennis courts, as well as new turf baseball and softball fields, as well as adding competition lighting to all of those venues. Construction began right as school ended in early June, and it's scheduled to open next fall. So here's a rendering kind of coming from the Murchison side. If you want to go to the next slide. Here's a slide kind of looking from campus, looking down at the new facilities. Now, this is what they're going to look at. Here's what we got going on. Next slide. We've been doing a ton of earthwork here on this site and grading and getting the site ready. As you knew, this was a campus that was going strong at the end of school, and these were fields. And these have all been taken out. The tennis courts have been taken out. The fields have been taken out, and they're grading and they're moving forward. Next slide. This is looking straight from campus down towards the 101. And that'll be the baseball field there. Next slide. So at Cappuccino, this project includes the replacement and new lighted tennis courts, as well as a new turf, softball, and multi-sport field. So you'll see the multi-sport field there on the left. Next slide. There's just a close-up of the baseball field at the corner. Just a really exciting, also adding some competition lighting there as well. I didn't note this because it's coming in the internal part of the campus, but we also be adding competition lighting for our pools, which is a really exciting addition. Next slide. This is looking at the gym, looking southward. This is where the softball field will be. Next slide. And this is looking down at the corner. This is where the baseball field was and will be replaced. And they are just going on these projects. It's really, really exciting. We're going to have some wonderful facilities come the fall of 2022, and also great community resources for the San Bruno and the Millbrae area. Next slide. Or sorry, Dr. Kelly, Dr. Skelly, would you like to go over the Peninsula High grand opening,
yeah.
or me?
Yeah, let's go to that next slide. Oops, do you have it on there? Okay, so next Thursday, as I mentioned, we'll be back to school night. As we said, those will be generally virtually, but we will have the ribbon cutting on Thursday, September 2nd, from 5:30 to 6:30 at the Hinckley site. We're looking forward to that. Ms. Chalkley is doing a lot of work. Mr. Campana, the staff over there. We're really excited about that opportunity to christen the school, if you will. And we appreciate the support of the voters. We have a parent who has a taco truck who's going to provide food for us, and it's just going to be a really nice event. We invited Mr. Friedman to that opening. As you know, he was the board member last year. He may or may not be able to attend, but we've also invited dignitaries and other folks who've been supportive here. So it should be a really nice event, and we look forward to seeing as many board members who can come. So I think now, Mr. Griffin, I have actually finished my report.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we're going to continue on with K4, report of CSEA Chapter 519 representative.
We do not have a report from CSEA tonight, but we do have Paula Ackerman from the adult school.
Okay, good evening. Would you like to make your report?
I'm Paula Ackerman from the San Mateo Adult School. Thank you, Dr. Skelly and Dr. Black and Regents. It's nice to see you again. I'm here to tell you about 3 important things that has happened with our school, all positive. The San Mateo Adult School CASA testing team, teachers and staff have rightfully earned this honorable award as recognized by the California Department of Education for their outstanding efforts of this past year. Congratulations to all. We are so proud. What an incredible honor and acknowledgement to jumpstart our new school year. Secondly, we are overjoyed to announce that the San Mateo Adult School has been awarded a grant from the Rotary Club of Foster City. This is the 2nd year in a row that the adult school has been awarded this grant. This grant will go towards our skills training program that assists English language learners preparing to go into the workforce. And third, I would like to add that in our ESL program, we are monitoring and responding to student needs. Our English learner community, many of whom are parents or grandparents of district kids, face numerous challenges, and it's important to meet it where it can be best served. For some students, that is an online option. For others, it's hybrid or on campus. We as teachers, including union member Patricia Brown as coordinator, are listening to students and keeping a close eye on attendance and other patterns. We know that the skills and knowledge of this community resonate out across, not just from this district, but the various cities it serves and into the future. We take serving English learners as best as we possibly can very seriously. So thank you for letting me share this information for you, and thanks for your backing at all times.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to move on to L1, 21-22 annual district goals approval. Dr. Skelly.
Thank you very much. As the board knows, on August 12th, the annual goals were brought to the board for review tonight. We're hoping to get your approval. We're going to have a short presentation, most of which you're going to be hearing from Dr. Kemke. Go to the next slide. Okay, take it away.
All right, good evening. So much of this will be a repeat from what we heard on the 12th with the addition of the metrics. I am asking Mr. Simmons to join me here as the Director of Assessment. We'll talk through some of those metrics. It's just a reminder that all of these goals are guided by our equity vision and mission that you can see there. Next slide. And as we've mentioned before, our LCAP and district goals are divided into 4 priority areas: authentic relationships, safe and connected communities, inclusive and relevant learning for every student, and supporting empowering staff. Next slide. Just to give you an idea, tonight's presentation will just be very brief, talking about the baselines that we're setting for each one of the metrics associated with the goals in the priority areas. We outline here when we anticipate to bring back to you a more thorough presentation, either by Mr. Simmons or other appropriate staff members on the metrics associated with each one of those goals. So you'll see these dates run through the whole school year, talking about staff diversity, the surveys that we're going to be providing to families, students, staff, the discipline and attendance data, much on the academic data, and we've separated out English learner progress there as well. So I'm going to pass it over. Hopefully he's been promoted to Mr. Simmons, and he's going to talk us through the baselines for each one of these metrics.
Next slide, please. Good evening, board members, district cabinet. So just a quick reminder, this is the authentic relationships area. If you could skip ahead another slide, please. And so as requested, we've delineated here metrics across this area. Most of these metrics are related to survey results that we'll be conducting over the next year. And so in some cases, there's baselines that we're going to be setting this year because we've not actually administered those yet. Next slide, please. The next slide is related to safe and connected communities. Next slide, please. And so inside this particular metric, we have our traditional sort of discipline measures, so specifically related to suspensions and expulsions, as well as chronic absenteeism. Chronic absenteeism, well, those 3 are actually all required state metrics, if you will, except for chronic absenteeism, but we've kept that because that has been an issue and we're particularly acutely concerned about that in the context of, sorry, can you not hear me?
No, we're good. We can hear you.
Okay, sorry. And so we, because our suspensions and expulsion rates were so low over the last 18 months, we've actually gone back to 2018-19 as our baseline for those measures. And because our suspension rates are actually quite low, as percentages go, we've actually now gone to actually just using a count of suspensions, not just, and it will be disaggregated. When we share this data, when we talk about discipline in a couple of months in particular, we'll be disaggregating this data. So do know, I should have said that actually at the beginning, that we will be disaggregating all of this information by subgroup of students, a numerically significant subgroup, as we go through the year. For the purposes of this presentation, we're really looking at the high level, kind of averages across the whole district. And then lastly, there's another couple of particular points here that come from our panorama survey, our annual kind of what will become our annual student, family, and staff survey, which we will administer for the first time to families this fall, and for the second time to staff and students over the course of this year. Next slide, please. This third area is really our kind of teaching and learning focused area. Next slide, please. And this one is where you're going to find the most traditional sort of academic measures. And so the first is to raise our college and career indicator up to 80% by 2024. That's going to be a significant growth for us, but we think it's important to obviously have all of our students ready for the next phase of their life, as evidenced by the multiple measures that are captured in the college and career indicator. We'll be presenting that data in December on the class of 2021. And in that meeting, we'll actually go into a few details about exactly what the college and career indicator is. One can also click on the link there and find out more about it. But it is the most interesting and also complicated measure that the state has created. But it really is kind of the final measure of students in California as they progress into their future. So it really needs to reflect the diversity of things that students might actually accomplish during their time in their high school career, but really in their whole K-12 experience. And then the other pieces there are ones that we've had in the past. So our graduation rate, our 10th graders being on track. That's really kind of our early warning measure of of credit accumulation and readiness for college and career readiness. That one we look to raise. It's sort of flattened out at about around 85 to 90% over the last couple of years. There's data in the appendix of this document that sort of has information from past years. But I will say that that is one that we're really going to be tracking, especially in light of the pandemic and sort of concerns that we saw the disproportionate under-attainment of credits among our historically underserved students during the pandemic. And so, all of our efforts to, engage in summer school and all sorts of other activity, credit recovery are intended to recoup some of those losses, but that's when we're going to be paying particular attention to with our subsequent classes going forward. And then the last few measures are related to CASP. We have taken essentially a 2-year hiatus from CASP. And so again, we're going back to measuring our progress on CASP. It's been a couple of years since we've actually literally taken it. And so we will do that work this year and see what progress we make. Currently, we were at 71% in language arts of students meeting or exceeding the standard, as well as, and in mathematics, it was at 50%. I would say the key piece there is really selling to students the value of the CASP is going to be a really important part of making that measure really authentic, because right now we actually think that's an undercount of student performance, because students have lots of other assessments that they take in the spring of their junior year that have a lot more currency. And as a consequence, they sort of devote their attention to those assessments and not as much the CASP. There is a value add for students in the CASP. And so we're going to talk about that in terms of their college matriculation into the CSUC system. They get themselves out of some requirements if they do that. And then lastly is another measure of kind of a pre-measure for our college and career indicator, which is this is a new measure of the number of students that have taken at least 2 advanced placement, international baccalaureate, or dual enrollment courses before they graduate. And that's one of the parts of the college and career indicator that we want to be tracking in particular. And so we want to move what is currently 52% up to 67% by the time we get to 2024. Next slide, please. And then this is we've pulled out a set of English learner specific metrics. And one of those is the LPAC, and that's the English learner assessment the state assessment that we administer. One of the things that's happened during the pandemic is that administering that assessment was very difficult because it has multiple components to it. And it was just very difficult to get all of our English learner students to participate in that when we were in distance learning. So we're looking to go back to and what was also unfortunate was that the only full administration of that assessment was actually in 2019 because it was a brand new assessment in 2018-19. So we only have 1 year of sort of good data from that assessment. So we're going to go back to that year. We're in the process of establishing those baselines now. And we'll present those when we actually present our English Learner Progress meeting. This will be in April alongside our DLAC presentation. And then the last couple there are growth in our students who make 1 year of advancement in their ELD levels. And then the last is redesignation rates. And again, we look to move those. And again, those are for English learners specifically. I mean, our English learner subgroup in particular, our students in language development, not our students not our English learners who are in the mainstream program. Next slide. That takes us to the end of the metrics. This last one is essentially all surveys and feedback we'll be receiving from staff. And so there are no metrics yet set. We will be setting baselines this year. We will report those baselines, that data when we administer the surveys to staff, since this one is really devoted to staff. And that is the end of the presentation. Obviously we'll answer questions.
Board, I don't see any hands. Of course, Trustee Hanley.
So I appreciate the metrics that are brought back. That was one thing I was definitely looking for at the last meeting. The one area which I mentioned last time that I'm still interested in getting a reading on is maybe the panorama survey, the area of depression and sadness, and we had some kind of reading on that. I've forgotten exactly what the name of the previous survey was that we did, but there was a question, or there were several, I think there were 2 or 3 questions that had variations on that theme. Is it possible to get that built into the panorama survey or a survey?
Absolutely. And they're part of our social emotional learning. That module of the panorama survey will include those kinds of issues. It was the California Healthy Kids survey is the survey you're referring to, and it was a measure of sadness that we had out of that. Yes.
Yeah, because I do think we need to follow up on that, and we do have some trend data from the previous surveys, which I think is still relevant. We could conceivably use the same questions.
Great. Agreed. And we will present that data in.
Very similar. We could use the same questions or very similar questions.
Great. We'll do. We're literally in the process of revising and kind of reforming our questions right now. So we'll call that one out in particular.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? Trustee Lees-Dwyer.
Okay. My question is the diversity training that is being offered on September 23rd. Why is it only for certificated, and why aren't the classified employees included in that?
You want to take that one, Dr. Kempe, or Sheldon?
Sure. So,
Julia?
Yeah. So the training on October 4th is our professional development day. Is that the?
I thought the slide said September 23rd. Am I wrong? I don't see, you show it to us, then it's gone. So I wrote, I think it was September 23rd. Am I wrong?
I think it is October 4th. It's Indigenous Peoples Day. That's the day that we have
So what is on September 23rd?
September 23rd is the board meeting that I think Dr. Black will bring information about hiring diversity. So that's one of the metrics.
Okay. So then let's go to, are classified included in the training on October 4th?
We are working on a plan to include as many of the classified staff on October 4th as possible. So I will actually include that in my board update this week on how we're some of the ways that we're trying to do that.
Okay. Thank you.
Any more questions?
So we're asking for a vote on this. This is approval for that.
Okay, is there a motion?
To approve this?
I'm sorry?
I make a motion to approve.
Okay. Is there a second?
A second.
Okay, Trustee Lamb with the motion, Trustee Hanley with the second, Trustee Andrade Zuniga, how do you vote?
I vote yes. And I have some questions, but they're more technical and I'll just ask offline.
Okay. Trustee Land,
Yes.
trustees Lees Dwyer,
Yes.
trustee Hanley.
Yes.
I'll vote yes, and we'll adopt the district goals and look forward to updates and some progress against those metrics. So thank you for the presentation. We'll move on to L2.
Let's see, we're running a little bit ahead of schedule, which is always good news, right, Mr. Griffin? Our part of our presentation team is at San Mateo Foster City as part of their California Voting Rights Act presentation. So what we'd ask, if the board's okay, that we move this, we continue to agenda item N1 and continue with the agenda, and then around 8:30, if that's okay, or as soon as we get done this, whichever comes first, we take up the L2, if that's okay.
Okay. It's
Can we have
fine.
consensus that?
Yeah, I would say, does anybody object to that proposal?
I don't see any other.
You're muted.
You muted yourself, Linda.
Sorry, I don't see any other options.
Exactly.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay,
Okay.
so yeah, the next item, Dr. Black.
Yes, we have personnel actions and addendum for approval.
I move approval.
Second.
Okay. Trustee Andrade Zuniga.
I vote yes, but I have a question. Does anybody know if there's ever been like asking students about certain substitute teachers and how they feel about them? Like before, I don't know if there's been any district that you've ever heard of that have asked students about specific substitutes and bringing them back and things like that.
When the teacher returns to the classroom, they often talk with the students regarding their experience with the substitute teacher. There are forms both for the teacher to fill out and the substitute teacher to fill out in the system, and usually the administrative assistant principal reviews those, as well as the district office, especially if there's something about red flags or something that can improve the process. We do get a lot of feedback on our substitutes, and if we do need to intervene, we do so.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I just always wonder what the students think about certain people coming back, and I don't know. I wonder what that's like for them. You know, we ask the teachers and we ask the substitute teacher, but you know, what about the kids, because they're the ones directly affected? So just wondering. Thank you.
Oh, absolutely. I meant to say that the teacher garners comments from the students. They're usually not too shy about, you know, speaking of their experience with the teacher, and then the teacher gauges whether or not they would like that substitute back, because they do identify substitutes when they know they're going to be out. And if the substitute provided you know, good instruction and the students had a good experience with the substitute, then they'll often ask that substitute back, so there will be some consistency.
Thank you.
Yeah, I believe, did you vote yes on that motion?
Yeah.
Okay, trustee Land, how do you vote?
I'm going to vote yes, and my comment is thank you, Kirk, because I think a lot of teachers do listen to their students about the substitutes, and even principals do too as well.
Trustees Lees Dwyer,
Yes.
trustee Hanley,
Yes.
and I'll vote yes, and the personnel actions will pass 5-0. Into approval of MOU between CSEA 519 and the San Mateo Union High School District.
Yes, so this is in relation to the COVID Act that provides for free food for all of our students throughout the school year. And we have pretty good selection, so we're having long lines in brunch and lunch. And this MOU provides for some of our part-time employees to work more hours in cafeterias and our school lunchrooms and on the campuses. And if that isn't sufficient it allows the district to hire part-time workers And then with the understanding that once the program ends, so will these employment opportunities, although obviously they'll have experience in the district and can apply for openings as they come up.
I make a motion to approve.
Second.
Second. Oh.
Okay.
It's a great program and very good for setting it up.
I have a question. Is this funded with CARES money, the additional people, or is this coming out of the general fund?
Yeah.
I'm happy to take this question. So this is part of the federal government's increase to universal feeding for the 2021-2022. So it gives the district the same reimbursement rate that it used to give on free and reduced to anyone who takes a meal for this year. So we're universally offering food to all of our students this year. It is a 1-year commitment by the federal government, but the state government has shown some interest in potentially bringing forward some similar projects moving forward. So more to come on that.
Trustee Land.
Can I ask a question? So Yancy, this is a very selfish question. Why it seems like a lot of high school districts are doing it this year and initiating it this year, but it's a program that's supposed to start for next year. How can we do this for this school year when it's supposed to be for next school year? So like my district is not going to be doing it because of financial situations.
So the program was implemented this year from the federal government. I believe what you're noting is the state's commitment to this program moving forward. So it's two different programs. So some districts are in the federal program, and if you are, then you're eligible to move forward this year. And so that's likely where there's.
Program. Yeah.
And yeah, I don't know for your district that you work in.
I think we have very low numbers, and that's why. Okay.
Yeah, likely it makes it extremely difficult with the structure of those programs. But no, we're extremely excited to move forward with this. We're seeing numbers twice what we've ever seen, and it's great to see all those kids eating on campus.
That's awesome.
It's wonderful.
Congrats. That's awesome.
So another question, Mr. Hawkins, in terms of compliance requirements that had been in place and may be in place now, how are we adjusting or adapting our reporting for auditing purposes, or do we have to make any changes?
So in terms of, there are no changes in the requirements with the exception that all students are eligible to receive a meal. So all of the federal requirements, audit requirements around nutrition, all audit requirements about students taking a breakfast, a lunch are still in place for this year. It'll be interesting to see how they move forward into next year. But a lot of the flexibility that we were given last year has moved away, with the exception of the huge flexibility that we're allowed to serve all of our students at every meal.
Okay. Got a motion in a second, I believe. Trustee Andrade Zuniga, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
Trustee Land,
Enthusiastically, yes.
Trustees Lees Dwyer,
Yes.
Trustee Hanley,
Yes.
I'll vote yes, and that motion will pass 5-0. Excuse me. Approve N3, approve the adult school memorandum of understanding for multi-level ESL class at San Mateo County Jail.
This is an MOU with the Sheriff's Department for the San Mateo County Jail, where the adult school will provide ESL instruction, both beginning and advanced levels. This has been on the agenda a couple times before. We've had to work our way through the Sheriff's Department, but we're very excited for the program. And to begin this, our adult school director, Angela Taylor, has experience with this in the East Bay, and she's here to answer any questions you may have about the program.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
First, I want to say this is a great way to work with the Sheriff's Department instead of having SROs in our schools, my opinion. But I wanted to say that I wanted to ask about the survey. Who is going to be responsible for developing the survey, and how is it developed? Like what type of questions will be asked, and whether, well, it's going to be a program for people that are learning how to, speak English. So I just want to make sure that a cultural component will also be taken into consideration.
Thank you for your question, and good evening, Board of Trustees, Dr. Skelly, Dr. Black, and Dr. Kempke. That's a good question. It's challenging working with the Sheriff's Department. It takes a really long time. It's a government agency. So we are going to work on that survey together. But the adult school will definitely take the lead in that effort. And we do a number of different surveys in our school already. So we're going to be working on that. And I will have to get back to you on exactly how we'll do that, but we are going to take the existing surveys that we have and use them in the jail. And they're really, the Sheriff's Department is really leaving that up to us to develop. So I do appreciate that, but we're working on that right now.
Are there any other questions? Trustees Lees Dwyer.
I just have a comment, actually. I think this is a really important program, and I think that supporting people with helping people develop language skills who are truly struggling in society for all sorts of reasons. And it may just offer that glimmer of hope, that path to someone that I can do this, I can speak the language, I can go on to adult school, I can do more. And it may break the cycle for people. And I think that is so important. So I think this is an excellent program, and I'm really proud of our adult school for doing it.
I was going to.
Thank you so much. Oh, thank you so much, Trustee Lees Dwyer. And I do want to say what's really unfortunate and interesting at the same time, approximately 49% of the San Mateo County Jail is non-English speaking.
Right.
So there is definitely a need. They are individuals, they're part of our community, they come back home, they may even be family members of our students. Yep. So this is something very dear to my heart. I was a GED teacher in a parolee education program for 9 years. And education is the most effective means of reducing recidivism.
Yeah.
I had the highest graduation rates of any other teacher in that program in the state of California. So I know firsthand with experience, this is really important. And I'm really excited because this is actually historical. This program will take place in the new jail, which is a programming jail, they call. So that means it's padded with programs to really help people get out of that cycle.
It's wonderful.
I think I'll make a motion to approve this MOU.
Second.
No.
Well, foot race there. Trustee
Hand
Land.
raise.
Yeah.
Hand raise.
Trustee Land, you clearly got the motion. Just the Trustee Andrade Zuniga. You'll get the second. And
I'll take the third.
There you go. It's a great program.
I'm sure there's a fourth and a fifth there, but we won't go there. So Trustee Andrade Zuniga, how do you vote?
I vote yes. I mean, there's such a correlation between not being able to understand the language and the culture and all that, and then ending up in the legal system. So thank you so much.
Trustee Land.
This is a true investment in our community. So yes.
Okay, Trustee Lees Dwyer.
This is a beginning, and I vote yes.
Trustee Hanley.
Yes.
And I'll vote yes. And that MOU will pass 5-0. N4, approve the job description for the new position at testing assessment coordinator for the adult school.
Yes, you heard Paula Ackerman that the adult school have won some awards for the CASI testing, which is a comprehensive adult student assessment system, tests reading, math, writing, and the adult school needs a coordinator in order to facilitate the increasing number of tests that they put out. Again, Ms. Taylor's here for any questions.
I'd just like to make a motion to approve that.
Second,
Okay,
Thank you.
trustee Land with the motion and trustee Lees Dwyer with the second. Trustee Andrade Zuniga, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
Okay, trustee Land, how do you vote?
Yes.
Trustee Lees Dwyer,
yes.
trustee Hanley,
Yes.
I vote yes, and we're 5-0 passing that. And we're gonna move on to Q1, approval of selection of real estate consulting brokerage services firm. Thank you, Ms. Taylor.
So, Mr. Hawkins.
Thank you all.
All right, thank you. Thank you so much. So as you know, in June, the district issued a request for proposals for real estate consulting and brokerage services. This RFP was in support of the district's continuing efforts to acquire employee workforce housing. And this is one of the key avenues that the district is moving forward with. We received proposals at the end of July. And then after reviewing those proposals, we brought in firms for interviews. I'd like to thank Trustee Lees Dwyer for sitting on the interview panel with us. Had some great interviews, really wonderful firms. I wanted to thank all the firms that put in proposals. They all were very impressive. But after reviewing the proposals and meeting with those firms, we made a selection of DCG as the preferred vendor to partner with. The board and the community are very aware of DCG in their work with the district around the Crestmore site. And so we will continue that relationship moving forward. In the coming weeks, we will bring forward the contract with DCG for these services, but they will be in line with the proposal that was given to the district in July. I'm texting right now with Landis Graydon from DCG. We're ahead of schedule here at the board meeting, so I take full responsibility. I told him that it would likely be a little bit later in the evening, so I don't think he'll jump on right now.
Hey, trustees Lees Dwyer.
Okay, we interviewed two firms and I participated in the interviews. And this is a position that we had, this contract consulting position. We've had this before. And I know before, I recognize how important services are because we're not real estate people. And we need people who understand particularly school district real estate, public entity real estate, working with cities, all of those things. And so I think that having a professional consultant to help us who really knows this stuff is really important. And both of the organizations were well represented at the interview process. I think that DCG was definitely the superior of the two. And I think part of that was their approach and how they look at things and how they connect and how they level with you. They tell you what they think and why. And I think that's truly important as we do business because it's an area that's not our expertise. And so we need to rely on their insight and intelligence in that regard. So I'm very pleased that we're moving forward with DCG.
We don't have a motion. It's just kind of information.
Oh, no, I thought it was a motion. It's
I
a
think
motion.
it's to
Approve.
It's approve the selection. The contract will be brought at a later point.
Got it.
But we have to approve the selection. I move we approve the selection.
Second.
So we got a motion by trustee Lees Dwyer and a second by trustee Land. Trustee Andrade Zuniga. How do you
I vote yes.
Trustee Land,
Yes.
trustees Lees Dwyer,
Yes.
trustee Hanley,
Yes.
and I'll vote yes. And that motion will pass 5-0. And we're gonna go to R1, moving May meetings to the 5th and 19th, 2022.
Right, so we had a board meeting scheduled for 12th and the 26th. If you remember, the 26th is the last day of school. Let's move will make board meetings smooth in April, May, and allow us to get the work done that we need to get done in both May and June. So we ask for approval.
Is there a motion?
I'll move approval.
Second.
Okay, we got a motion by trustee Hanley, second by trustee Andrade Zuniga. Trustee Andrade Zuniga, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
Trustee Land,
Yes.
trustee Lee Dwyer,
Yes.
trustee Hanley.
Yes.
Okay, I'll vote yes, and that motion will pass 5-0. And lo and behold, we're down to R2 specific board policies.
Sorry.
The train was just gonna keep going, boy. People better be here. That's all I got to say. So, did anybody get a chance to actually go through them? I know this is just to discuss any questions or changes, and they would end up being put on consent the next round. Are there any items to discuss or any questions?
I don't have any. I don't have any.
Okay.
I was just curious about collective bargaining. What was the court case? On the collective bargaining,
Dr. Black, can you help us with that?
I have to look that up for you, the court case. I'll
Yeah,
look it up.
It's just curiosity. Just email it to me if you can.
Will do. Yep.
Okay, so if that is the case, these will move to consent at the next meeting. And let's see, is there something after R2?
No, so we're ready to go back to L2 at this point.
Okay.
Good.
So, the demographer is stuck at San Mateo Foster City, but will join us shortly. We're prepared for this contingency because we have our attorney here who is ready to help us out. Laura, can you promote him or?
Yes,
Yeah,
he's
Jonathan.
coming right now. Jonathan Smith.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Barry Smith, you're up. Maybe you could spend a couple minutes introducing yourself, and then we'll go to the presentation, if you don't mind.
All right, thank you. Should I try to share my screen for the presentation right now?
Why don't you start by just telling us a little bit about yourself, and then we'll go to your screen. We'll share. We'll share from our end.
All right, sounds good. Thank you for having me. Superintendent Skelly, members of the board. My name is Jonathan Barry Smith. I'm an attorney here at Lozano Smith. I've spent some time in the Bay Area for undergraduate and law school. Really like it up here. And I've been doing some CVRA related work, actually a lot of it lately. So I'm very excited to present this information tonight. I recognize that the board received some information from my colleague Harold Freeman a few months back. So my intent was to just provide, a refresher of sorts, an overview of what the CVRA is and what the transition process is to transition to by trustee area elections. So potentially I could go through my slides and then have ample amount of time to answer questions. And then perhaps after that, Dr. Douglas Johnson will be available. I believe he's definitely someone that's worth waiting for. He's one of the preeminent demographers out there. So I'm open for proceeding in whatever way the superintendent and the trustees want to go through.
Right, so we'll have your presentation up now and you can walk us through it. That'd be great.
All right, perfect, thank you. So as I mentioned, I'm going to go through the transition process, how to transition to trustee area elections. And hopefully we'll have Dr. Douglas Johnson go through some of the more logistics for the districting process and creation of maps, et cetera. So if you could go to the next slide. And I guess the slide after this. Wow, a lot of All right, so starting off with the overview of the California Voting Rights Act. As you'll see on the next slide, California Voting Rights Act, it was passed in the early 2000s. The goal of prohibiting the use of at-large elections that impair the ability of a protected class to do, one, elect candidates of their choice, and two, to influence the outcome of an election. So the CVRA is basically trying to prohibit something called racially polarized voting. Racially polarized voting occurs when candidates are not able to, when the public isn't able to elect candidates of their choice or influence the outcome of an election. And so one of the main distinctions between the California Voting Rights Act and the Federal Voting Rights Act is that the California Voting Rights Act, for a plaintiff to succeed, they do not need to prove an intent to discriminate at all. So the bar is lower for a CVRA action. But moving on to the next slide, this graphic, I think, is a helpful way of showing what at-large elections are. It occurs when board members are allowed to reside anywhere within the jurisdiction of the district, and all registered voters vote for all seats of the board. So this is the at-large method of election that is subject to California Voting Rights Act liability and is currently the method of election that the San Mateo Union High School District Board is elected through. But moving to the next slide, this is how we can address that. By trustee area elections, denoted by this graphic, this is where trustees must reside within one of a few, in this instance 5, specific trustee areas, and only the voters that reside within each of those trustee areas is allowed to vote for that particular trustee. And so you could imagine if a certain trustee area had a heavily minority population grouped together in one area, that minority group would have a much better chance or opportunity to elect the trustee of their choosing. And so districts that utilize by trustee area elections are immune from CVRA liability. Moving to the next slide. And this, I don't need to belabor this piece, but public agencies have struggled with CVRA litigation. For one, it's a very high cost to litigate these matters. There's high attorney's fees. And to this point, no public agency has ever successfully defended a CVRA challenge, although there's one case currently pending. And one reason for this is that many school districts decide to settle during these pieces of litigation. And I have a couple of instances of fees and costs to plaintiffs' counsel, City of Santa Clara, West Contra Costa Unified School District, City of Modesto. So those fees are quite high, but the good news is when you go through this process and transition to by trustee areas, you're immune from these sort of lawsuits.
Can I ask a question?
Oh, sure, of course.
Can you tell me a little bit about the Santa Monica case? Is it the Santa Monica Malibu School District?
Yes, the Santa Monica case, of course, I could provide a little more background to that. So that was a case where Santa Monica initially argued that there was no way, even through by trustee areas, that the minority population would be able to elect candidates of their choice. So I think it began, the trial court sided with the plaintiffs, and I think it was around $22 million was the cost to plaintiffs, but then the Court of Appeal sided with the City of Santa Monica with that argument that I just mentioned, that even if they had by trustee area elections, the minority population still wouldn't, or at least it anticipated wouldn't be able to elect candidates of their choice. But that opinion, public agencies are not able to rely on currently because the case is currently going to the California Supreme Court, and I don't have an update on when that decision will be finalized. But at the moment, no public agency has successfully defended a CVRA challenge. And one reason potentially for this is the legislature is clear in its preference for districts and public agencies, cities, et cetera, to transition to this form of elections. So I hope that brief overview kind of helped answer your question.
Thank you.
So if we could move to the next slide, I'd like to go through what this process can look like on the ground. And so moving to the next slide. So this is just a refresher of what the district has already gone through. The first step in transitioning to trustee area elections is to adopt an intent resolution. The district ended up doing this on February 26th. So one step has already been done. We're already on our way. Moving to the next slide, it'll show where we're at right now. So the second step in the transition process is to hold at least 2 what we call pre-map hearings. These are public hearings that basically allow members of the community, the Board of Trustees to discuss this process as a whole, maybe discuss what maps might eventually look like, whether or not to go through this transition process. And so tonight we have one of those pre-map hearings scheduled. And then in a couple of weeks on September 9th, the second pre-map hearing is scheduled. And one reason why those meetings are so close together is statutorily, they must be held within 30 days of each other. So that's the area that we are right now. We're going to have one of those pre-map hearings tonight. But moving on to what's going to happen in the future, if we go to the next couple of slides, or I'm sorry, I jumped the gun a little bit. This is an optional step that can happen at the pre-map hearing, the second pre-map hearing that we're going to have. This is an opportunity, we call them criteria resolutions, an opportunity for the board to adopt a certain resolution that lists out the criteria that the board wants the demographer to consider when establishing trustee area boundaries. Now, the main fundamental criteria is to make sure that each trustee area has close to equal population. So the population criteria is required by law, it must happen, but there are multiple ways to divide district boundaries up and to create multiple maps. And so if the board chooses, it could discuss what secondary criteria or other criteria that they'd like the demographer to consider, knowing that they would be weighed differently. Maybe one map would focus more on making sure that the district boundaries are compact and contiguous. Another map might focus more on the topography of the district or making sure that communities of interest are put together in the same trustee area. And then there are other considerations that the board could come up on their own, maybe making sure that school district boundaries that the district boundaries are consistent with school attendance areas. There's definitely some discretion in what the district board ends up doing with this kind of resolution. And I believe when Douglas Johnson appears, he can go into further detail on how this can be actually implemented in the map development process. Are there any questions that I could answer on the optional criteria resolution that I just described?
Again, I have another question.
Yeah, of course.
So would it be possible in this kind of scenario to have as a secondary criteria that the voting areas or the trustee voting areas include more than one high school. So it's not just, so you were saying by attendance area, so it was the same. What about in the concern of balkanization? Could they be in, could the voting areas be in 2 high school areas or kind of overlapping but still include the priority to make sure that diversity is represented?
Yes, definitely. That's the beauty of these criteria resolutions, is that the board can decide what it wants the demographer to focus on and how to weigh those factors. Of course, the preeminent factor is balanced populations, and there's a few mandatory factors that the board, that the demographer has to go through and implement. But after those mandatory factors and criteria are taken into account, they're really, almost anything that you can think of within reason, I'm sure the demographer could at least attempt to implement in the draft maps. But like I mentioned, I believe Douglas Johnson will be able to better articulate exactly how that process is done, and the kind of maps that are drawn in order to comport with what the board wishes for those secondary criteria.
Thank you.
So we could move on to the next slide. So later on in the process, after the census data has been released and is readily available, there are going to be at least 2 map consideration hearings, or sometimes called post-map hearings. The reason why we call them post-map hearings is that the demographer has to publish at least 1 draft map a week before these hearings in order to give the community the chance to review the maps and see what some of the options are. After the community has a chance to see this, they can come to the board meeting and speak on which maps they prefer. There might be one map that members of the community prefer significantly over others, and that would be something for the district board to consider. But as you can see, the dates for these 2 hearings are scheduled in the beginning of 2022. And one of the reasons for this is we wanted to make sure that the demographers had plenty of time to review the census data. Throughout this pandemic, the census data has been postponed multiple times. The release of it has been postponed multiple times. So we're definitely at the point where by January 20th, demographers will have had the opportunity to analyze the census data and draft maps that comply with the law. And so this is just something to keep in mind as we go through what this process looks like. There are plenty of hearings. Moving on to the next slide, we're getting to the final map adoption hearing from the school board's perspective. This is tentatively scheduled for February 21st. There's one more public hearing where the board will eventually adopt or approve of their preferred map and sequencing of elections. And why I say preferred is that it's not a final decision per se when the district adopts its map, because the map would have to go to the county committee on school district organization. And that's, I can talk more about that on the next slide. So the San Mateo County Committee would have the opportunity to review the map that the district board approves. The reason being is that county committees on school district organization through Ed Code have the authority to change the method of election of a school district within its jurisdiction. So at the end of the day, the county committee will hear a presentation about the process that the district went through. They might ask questions about public comment? What did members of the community prefer in these maps? How did the district broadcast that this was happening? Was the community engaged in this process, or was it sort of swept under the rug? These are just some potential questions that the county committee might ask at the end of this process. So it's very helpful to, as the district already is doing, post this information on their websites, post this on social media, just to try to do everything that it can to inform the public that the district is going through this process and welcomes community input, community concerns, etc. And then at the end of this county committee review, the county committee will vote and they'll make a decision whether to approve or deny the district's proposal to establish trustee areas.
Before you go to the next slide, can I ask another question? I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
no problem.
So is the county committee, so I've been on this county committee, is it the general county committee, or is it a specifically, there's a smaller group, and then there's the larger group where is it that group, or is it the smaller group where that group voted for some people to have ongoing meetings?
So I'm not sure the San Mateo County Committee that would do this, I think, is a board of around 10 or maybe 11 or so elected officials. Is that the latter one?
So what happens is several are appointed by a more general committee that is represented by individuals from every board, and I've served on that committee several times. Okay. Got it.
So, and then I think we have one more slide that I wanted to touch on. If you go to the next slide. So I just wanted to make sure that the board was updated on this new Senate Bill 442. So before this bill was passed, once the county committee approved a proposal to transition to trustee area elections, it used to, well, and still does, constitute an order of election, which would allow the voters of the jurisdiction to, at the next general election, decide whether or not the district goes through this process. Now with Senate Bill 442, it basically allows the county committee to, by resolution, state that they are going to adopt and approve this transition by trustee areas without taking it to the voters for final approval. So basically, any school district or a public agency transitioning to by trustee area elections after January 1 of 2022, and as you can see from the previous slide, we anticipate this county committee review happening at the end of February. The county committee has the option to state at that hearing that the transition by trustee area elections will be finalized, won't have to go through the electorate for approval, and then the district can send that information to the registrar of voters or the county registrar's office to make sure that that is implemented in time for the November 2022 elections.
Mm-hmm.
So any questions on SB 442 or anything else that I discussed today?
Anybody have any questions?
No, it's very straightforward.
So, Jonathan, obviously our demographer is busy right now. What do you recommend we do here? Is there, yeah, so I mean, what other information, maybe you could walk us through his slides on here, and we'll see if it's pretty straightforward, then we may not need it. He could come in and pitch the last inning, but you can continue to work us through those. Well, how would you feel about that?
Yeah, no, that sounds like a great idea. I'd be happy to do that.
And we don't have many options given he's not here. You're the best we have. So why don't you keep going?
Yeah, no.
Superintendent Skelly, I'd also be happy to address some of the points I've been through, the transition to trustee area elections in another district recently.
Okay, so why don't we hear from Jonathan, and then if we need a relief pitcher, we know we got you ready to go.
Yeah, no, that sounds great. And just to go off of that, there will be another pre-map hearing. As I mentioned before, there's at least 2 of those. And for that one, we can do everything we can to make sure that a demographer is available to speak on that piece. I mean, usually the information is similar between the first pre-map hearing and the second pre-map hearing. Sometimes it's exact same information. So I can go through it this time. We can have a demographer go through the next time. I think that's definitely a good way to proceed.
Okay, good.
So we jump to the next part of the presentation. So just an introduction to the districting process. And some of this stuff will be similar to what I just discussed. Moving to the next slide. I think I touched on this previously, that there are federal requirements, such as making sure that there's equal population between the district boundaries. The Federal Voting Rights Act I mentioned previously. One thing to note with the California Voting Rights Act, I'm just a reminder. Actually, no, sorry about that. I already discussed this. No racial gerrymandering. These are requirements from the federal perspective. And then there's also on this right side in the blue column, a list of traditional redistricting principles. This is similar to the examples that I mentioned previously on the criteria resolution. The board can, or demographers will consider such factors such as the communities of interest, whether or not district boundaries are compact, contiguous, the topography piece, visible boundaries, natural or man-made, planned future growth, respecting voters' choice, continuity in office, minimize voters shifted to different election years. There's many criteria that have traditionally been used in the redistricting process, preserving the core of existing election areas, et cetera. So there's some mandatory goals, such as in the federal laws, and then some of these other principles. We go on to the next slide. So I believe this is the point where, yeah, the demographer would kind of ask questions such as, what is your neighborhood? What are its geographic boundaries? And I believe, and I apologize, I'm trying to understand what the main point of this. Okay, so this is a slide that kind of just explains some examples of physical features that can define a neighborhood boundary. For instance, you can see in that bullet point, natural neighborhood dividing lines. You know, it could be a highway, it could be a road, parts of geography like a river. Those are common ways that people determine what neighborhood they live in. Some people understand their neighborhood based off of what parks are near them, what schools, school attendance zones. There could be other landmarks that define what a neighborhood can be. And so when these maps are drawn for dividing district boundaries, that's definitely something to take into account. You could have members of the community asking why was a neighborhood split in two, or something along those lines. So there are multiple ways to define what a neighborhood is, and a demographer will be able to do what they can to try to make sure that is not interrupted. Moving on to the next slide, please. So here's something outside of neighborhood boundaries, but communities of interest. So there are many ways that you could define what your community is. It's not just the geographic area that you live in. I think this could be more internal, such as shared interests, shared characteristics. It could be social or economic interest. It could be how you're impacted by city policies. So there's basically multiple ways in which a community member can define or share what they believe their community to be. And then another question, would this community benefit from being included within a single trustee area for purposes of its effective and fair representation? This is sort of along the lines of what I mentioned earlier about racially polarized voting, and how if you have by trustee area elections and you group either minority populations together or communities of interest together, that conglomerate, that community will have a better chance of electing candidates of their choice. So definitions of communities of interest may not include certain relationships with political parties, incumbents, or political candidates. That's just something to flag there. Moving on to the next slide, please. And so I won't belabor this piece because this is definitely what the demographer, especially NDC, National Demographics Corporation, can provide to the district. So in this process of transitioning to trustee areas, demographers sometimes provide additional tools that basically make it easier for members of the community to be involved in the process by drafting their own maps. And so I believe this slide kind of shows one of those mapping tools that the demographer can make available for members of the public. But I don't want to step on Mr. Johnson's toes here. It's just in general, there are mapping tools that if the district decides to pay for it, allows members of the community to be involved in the process further by, going onto this site, drawing lines and experimenting with what these potential trustee area maps can look like. And so if you move on to the next slide, it might be more about, I believe this is another mapping tool that National Demographics Corporation can make available to the district. Moving on to the next slide. And yes, this is a piece that I had briefly touched on previously. It is definitely important, and San Mateo Union High School District is already doing so, as a page on its website dedicated to this transition to by trustee area elections. And so from our experience at the firm, it is very helpful for a district to list out each step of the process, to provide background, just to help the community understand what's going on here and how they can be involved. It's very helpful that this website currently has all of the upcoming, at least scheduled meeting dates and what would happen at those dates. So members of the community can look at this, and maybe they're not interested in coming to the second pre-map hearing, but they might be very interested in coming to and providing comment at one of the post-map hearings. And so just making sure that this website is up to date, has all of the information and keeps the community informed is a very important step in the process for the district. The next slide, please. And so public hearing and discussion. I believe this is just something, questions to keep in mind, making sure that the community members ask themselves what their community of interest is, what are its boundaries, and would that member of the community prefer that that community of interest be in one trustee area, or that it have multiple representatives on the board by splitting that community of interest up into maybe, trustee area 1, trustee area 2. And so that community of interest has multiple representatives on the board. That could likely happen if the community of interest is very large. Smaller communities of interest, it might only be feasible for them to group together in one trustee area. But these are just the kind of questions to prime members of the public to make sure that they're thinking about this as we go through this process. moving
I have
on to, oh, sorry.
If I could let you know that Dr. Johnson just arrived, so he is here. He's in the house.
That is great. Superintendent Skelly, board, would you want Doug to jump in now, or maybe answer some questions that I wasn't able to properly go through? I'm happy to proceed in whatever way is best.
I have a question.
Yes, go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead, Dr. Scully. He had asked you a question first, but go ahead.
No, I defer to the board. I mean, I think we've got, Jonathan, you did an able job there in the absence of Douglas. But I think maybe you should answer the folks' questions, and then I think he can jump right into this party and help us move along. So
Can I
maybe
make a
that's your
suggestion?
question.
Can I
Sure.
make a suggestion? Maybe if we went back just a couple slides to the interactive, he can help us understand that a little bit better. Jonathan, you did a great job, but I think that's when I felt like I had a lot of questions.
Yes,
So.
of course, that's a great idea. Yeah, that'd be great.
But I have one question real quick. In your experience, have you seen any other school districts do any like focus groups or any sort of asking questions of the students and what they think about all of this? And I mean, they'll eventually, age out of being a student in our district. And so, it will definitely, I mean, it'll affect them regardless, but have you seen anything like that? And maybe if so, maybe we should do something like that too.
No, that's a great question. I cannot think of a district that's done that, but perhaps Douglas, do you have experience with that? Do you know any districts that have gone through that?
Yeah, and my apologies for the delay getting over to your meeting. The agenda item went almost 2 hours at the elementary school district. So thank you, Jonathan, for covering very ably. It's the advantage of working with Lozano Smith, as I know you were in very good hands with their team. So it is very rare. We did see it in Pomona Unified. Actually, the student board member on his own initiative organized the various student body presidents from the various high schools, and they had their own private discussion of the issue and talked about it back at their high schools with their student bodies and came back with their thoughts on the process. There they had both the change to district elections and the question about the number of board members on the agenda. But it takes a very confident student board member or student leader to raise these questions. But he, after the first 2 hearings were held, he felt he had heard enough and he went and did his student thing. So it's interesting. It's not that often that they weigh in, but it has happened.
Thank you.
So Bob, Linda and Greg have their hands up.
You okay? I'm sorry, could not see. I can't see pink hands and pink walls and whatever. So whose hand was up first?
Linda's first.
Okay, trustees Lee's Dwyer.
Okay. My question, I was doing the math while Jonathan was very ably presenting. And, I guess one of my questions, we have 6 cities that we are elected to serve. And I just looked at the proposed census data for the 6 cities. And so it turns out there's like 245,660 people when you add it all together. And they're different, there's some similarities in size, some great disparity in size. Is this something that you've seen a lot of? 5 board members, 6 cities, all these various size cities and schools? Mr. Johnson?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, just down the road, we did Sequoia High, and they similarly have a very large district with a real mix of jurisdictions making up their territory. And of course, the county as a whole is only 5 supervisorial districts, so you get all kinds.
I think the geography of it and all of the communities will make it very interesting, and I hope that there'll be a lot of public participation, actually. Thank you.
Trustee Land.
So if we can go back a few slides. Yeah, the map tools. Yeah. So if you can help us understand kind of how this can work and what we can get out of this. And then I have a question or two.
Sure. And actually, this goes to the question that was just asked about the size of the jurisdiction. So as you'll quickly realize, seeing details of different maps on an 8.5 by 11 PDF are really hard to see. And so this interactive review map is just going to be a link off the district's website. And people can enter an address and it'll zoom in on their address. They can zoom in and out. And as you have draft maps, they can click over on the right-hand side and see the maps one by one, all the way down to the individual house level. You can switch to a satellite view of this. And it really is as easy to use as Google Maps. So if someone can use Google Maps, they can use. You can't draw a map here. This is purely a review map site, but you can even turn on, we were actually just looking at a map at the elementary school that two maps had just a really slim difference. But you could turn the two layers on and by the coloring and the darkness of the shading, you could see where the differences were when two maps were very similar. So it's a way to look at maps in detail much more precisely than you can on an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper.
So I guess my second question then is maybe the next slide. Is there a way, so one of the concerns that I think myself and maybe one other board member have is we really don't want, and it might be pertain to what you might happen in Sequoia. I really am concerned that I don't want the board to be representing one school only, like a board member would be working for CAP versus, and because you'd have this balkanization that I think concerns me, where the interests would lie only with one school, and really you want to look at it from a bigger perspective as well, but also adhering to the first priority, which is getting the diversity, getting the priority. But I'm just concerned that, is there a way that we can kind of take the school boundaries and kind of make sure that the voting boundaries go into more than one area or more than one school boundary?
Yes, and it's a very common concern. I would say probably 2/3 of the jurisdictions that we work with end up trying to always make sure that each board member represents more than one attendance area, and each attendance area, to the degree possible, is more than one board member, so that exactly to what we're talking about. So board members don't say, "This is my school, that's your school, stay away." Very common concern. It gets harder as jurisdictions get better. Not better, bigger. Jurisdictions get bigger because there's just no way to get from one end of the district to the other without hitting the population number. But to a degree, you can certainly do that. Would actually suggest that plays more in the review map. So we can put the school locations in there, and we can put the attendance zones in there, so that people are looking at maps, they can actually see the attendance zone lines and see, is one concentrated entirely in one trustee area, or making sure that each attendance zone is represented by multiple board members. And the key thing that throws a lot of the public off a lot, and forgive me if this has already been covered, but is the public often first focuses on the school site, but it's not the school site that matters. It's the kids. So trust me, if your kid votes for trustee X, it doesn't matter, and goes to school A, that trustee is going to care about school A. If the kids whose parents vote for you go to that school, then that trustee is going to care. And that's what you want, is multiple trustees having a personal accountability for the events at a given school. That helps kind of avoid the balkanization and preserve all of us are here to represent all the kids mentality. So this can help. The community of interest tool, it's more useful for like a traditionally underrepresented area. If you have a part of the district that hasn't elected a board member 20 years or whatever, this would be a way to identify the borders of that and let the folks there weigh in on that. The already identified boundaries, like your attendance zones, residents don't have to draw them in. We'll just put them in that interactive review map.
Any more questions? Are we going to advance the slides and finish the presentation? Or was that it?
Sounds good.
I believe we were at the end of the presentation.
Because I timed that just right, didn't I?
Right? It's perfect.
Is it? So I think at this point, we're going to hold a public hearing. Do we have any, we're gonna open the public hearing now for comments on this pre-map. It's a pre-map hearing. Do we have any people wishing to speak at this time? Ms. Chalkley?
We do not.
Okay, because the attendance went from 18 down to 7 in the general public. So we did our duty. So we're gonna close that public hearing, and we thank you, gentlemen, for your time. And I guess, will you be at each of the hearings presenting, or will we have hearings without you in the future?
I believe the plan is for me to be at each one. I believe it's true of Jonathan as well.
Right. Yeah, it'll either be me or Harold Freeman at these hearings.
Okay.
I do have a question. So in the slideshow, it said there was the 2B step where we wanted to might talk about additional criteria. Is that something that we're going to incorporate? Because I just, based on what I'm talking about and what I know we've talked about in the past, how can we make that be in part of this process?
You would, the board would let us know, or Superintendent Skelly would let us know, and then the district will have a resolution, a criteria resolution that it could adopt at this second pre-map hearing. And basically the board will be able to have like a list of different factors that it would like to weigh, and it could kind of check off which factors on the list it would like the demographer to consider when drafting maps.
Okay. I'd like to see that happen. So that's my vote. I don't know if anybody else feels that way.
Anybody? Yes, trustees Lee Dwyer.
I would hope that Mr. Barry Smith continues on with us since he started the process with us, and Harold is welcome to participate maybe. But I think it would be good to have Jonathan continue with us. I think he was rather circumspect with his background. I looked on the Lozano Smith website, and he's been doing some writing and publishing in this area. So I would certainly like to see him involved with us. And he's a runner. So
Yeah.
I have a thing for
Thank you.
I love to run. So it'd be good to have a runner who's publishing in this area work with us. So
Dr. Johnson, we have these meetings scheduled. Are these meetings going to coincide with the elementary school district are we locked at the hip for these meetings?
No, I was going to add that. Happily, the reason the discussion went so long is they just voted on what map to adopt. So the San Mateo Foster City has finished their process.
wow.
And I won't have this
Wow.
conflict at the next meetings. So
Good for
my
them.
apologies for that, but that's why it went so long, as they were actually picking their map.
Just checking.
Yeah, I understand.
So where were we on the step 2B? We had 2 people that I believe were interested in adding some other criteria. Is that correct? Somebody help me.
I don't know, Peter. I was talking about things we had talked about at previous meetings, so I'm hoping we're still in alignment there. I'm just curious.
Yeah, I mean, my main criteria is that we're, avoiding having trustees represent individual schools. I'm not interested in having a Hillsdale trustee and a Cappuccino trustee. I want to avoid, having the Balkans created in the district to the maximum extent that we can. I don't know that I have any other criteria that jump out at me right now as criteria that are come up as big deals right now. I haven't looked at the census data in any detail. And I don't know. Yeah, I think I'll probably have to see how various maps look to come up with an idea, because it's hard to imagine them right now in the abstract. But that's the criteria that I have, is I just don't want, I don't want a Millbrae. I don't want a Millbrae trustee and a San Bruno trustee and a Hillsborough, Burlingame trustee. That's what I want to avoid.
That's kind of where I was coming from.
So is that a second criteria? Because we didn't want one school, one area, and now we don't want one city, one area.
Well, I think to a large extent that it's the same thing.
Yes.
Not if you live in Foster City. But anyway.
Yep.
Anyway.
Yep.
Well, my concern, like I see what you're saying, Trustee Henley. But my concern is that there hasn't been someone from San Bruno and Millbrae in a while. So that's my concern, is I want to make sure that we have equal representation from different areas. So maybe this will entice someone to run, or it will build the community to run,
Well, they'll certainly be part of a district, or in fact, they may be part of two districts. I mean, San Bruno could be part of San Bruno could be part of, you could have two districts that cover parts of San Bruno and parts of Millbrae. So, they're certainly not going to be not part of districts. That's not going to be a question. I'm just not really interested in having San Bruno itself be a district.
Well, I think if we set that precedence, right? So we, as a collaborative, governing body, I think that from the beginning, when we say that and we all meet together and we have that intention in mind, I think that is what's going to change a lot of these things, of these concerns. So it'll be interesting how everything kind of plays out.
Can you clarify that? I'm not sure I was following Trustee Andrade Zuniga. What exactly, just that last bit, can you restate that?
Like what? So the way that, if we set precedents to all of us being together, or?
Well, no, I just, in terms of the comment that what we were trying to accomplish, and I did not follow part of your comment in terms of because we're talking about individual cities, and I wasn't sure what you were saying with respect to the individual cities.
Well, the concern is that there's going to be one person identifying one school, or, speaking for one area, right? No, I think that if from the beginning, when we all, say there are people from other areas that get elected, right, because of this situation. I think early on in the way people are onboarded, I think that that's where we are unified and we come together as a board and make it very clear that we're not representing just our areas, but we're representing our district as all of our students. So that's what I mean, is that I think the intention for the beginning.
Oh, that's okay. That's fine. I get your comment now. Thank you.
I didn't.
Yeah, I didn't follow the unifying part of getting together and understanding who our constituents are as a collective group. So, thank you.
Yeah, because we are one governing body, right?
So yes, we got a finger up or a half a hand up by Trustee Please Dwyer.
Yeah, I just want to say that I think it is very important that the elected trustees represent the entire district, no matter what area in which they are located. At the same time, being mindful of the area in which they are located. So I think that, you know, we want to represent everyone and we don't want to lose that. And I think this board has been very good about representing everyone and focused on that. And that's something we as a board should hold on to as these changes come on.
Okay, Trustee Land, your hand is up, please, sir.
Both kinds. So I think in just listening to this, I'm hoping that the next process is we will get several maps to discuss, not just one, so we can talk about the diversity and the differences between the advantage of trying something like Plan A, which, you know, could be the overlapping, you know, dividing our school boundaries into several areas so that trustees are in more than one school area, but then also talking about the demographics to make sure that we have diversity and you know, in areas. So it's going to be kind of a balance. I was hoping to see more than one map so that we can discuss that and discuss the communities that we're talking about. So, you know, that we can get representation from the north and the north end of town so that that can be happening. So that's kind of what I was trying to get at. Are we going to have that?
Dr. Johnson.
Yeah, definitely. We always come forward with at least 3 initial drafts. And often, you know, no one likes any of those 3, and so people give feedback and we come back with 2 or 3, even 4 more. So you will certainly see at least 3, and by the end of this process, you may very well have seen 8 or 9 versions. Certainly.
Well, you know, one thing that I was going to look something up, but I won't. I understand. I think early in the presentation we were saying that those areas needed to be about the same size. And if we collectively consider the populations of Millbrae, and I don't know what the population of San Bruno is, even though I used to live there, I don't know what it is, but most of the population resides in and around San Mateo. Here, you know, it's the city of San Mateo. And if we're trying to honor that as part of the outcome, it would not surprise me is if we would not see through this process still, you know, the central district, the central part of the San Mateo being where the representation might be skewed still. Now, I'm not saying, I have no idea what the outcome will be, and we'll wait to see, but I think, is that not true? It needs to be equal size for each area?
Yes, that's correct. Within just a few couple of percent, either way, you have to have equal number of total population. And one thing for folks to be aware of is it is total population. So it's not voters, it's not students, it's total people counted in the census.
Well, if the census data on Google is correct, San Mateo is at 104 and San Bruno is at 42. So they're in second place size-wise. Then you get Burlingame at 31 and Foster City at 33. They're comparable. Millbrae at 22 and Hillsborough at 11. So it's kind of interesting because you do have a significant population among the 5, you know, less than San Mateo sized cities, which begins up at San Bruno. So I think the mapping is going to be very interesting. Will you be overlaying it so that you can see the overlays of one map over another? So you would see the population, and on top of that, you see maybe the diversity of the demographic, and then on top of that, is that part of the process?
Yes, we certainly can.
Okay,
given
that
the
might
interesting
work
information.
well for us because of the not only all the different demographics, but all these cities, 6 of them. Yeah.
Great. Trustee Land.
Sorry, I'm getting fascinated by this. So because you talked about
9:15,
populations and census, how do you handle something where you have a low propensity of voters, but a high density of population?
Yeah.
What happens there? Because if you have that, you might have some skewed voting. I don't know.
Yes, it's a good question. So to some degree, that actually is what drives the Voting Rights Act, is to say if there's an area of low turnout, historically low turnout voters because of people choose not to vote or they're not eligible to vote, that putting them together in a trustee area actually then lets them be heard more. So where they would normally get drowned out school district wide, they now have a voice. So at an extreme, I haven't looked at the numbers lately, but in the 90s, there was one congressional district in Orange County that took 250,000 votes to win. And there was a one congressional district that I actually lived in Pico Union neighborhood of Los Angeles, that only took 30,000 votes to win. You know, they both had the same number of people, but one was older and very high turnout. The other one was, you know, heavily immigrant and low turnout. So that's the extreme that I've ever found. Usually it's much, much closer than that. But certainly you will have disparities of, you know, one area will have many more voters than another just because of age and voting propensity levels. And that's just part of the process, and that's part of the impact of trustee areas. So.
Got it. Thank you.
Very interesting.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
I agree.
Are there any more
Okay.
questions?
So next board meeting, you two will be back, and
Yep.
we won't see maps yet, but we'll have a continued discussion about this topic of what criteria. Is that correct?
Sounds
Yes,
like
that's correct.
A little
Celebrate.
map would, even just a little map would be nice. You know, we like, I think we're all we like maps. I think
Yeah.
it would be good to see them.
Well,
We'll
yeah, but
see.
if we start doing that, we're not following the process. Will
I
that create
know.
an issue?
Right. I can see if I can get the review map up so it has demographics and trustee areas and city lines on it, but it won't have any draft maps on it.
That's okay. That's
Yeah.
something.
To start.
So, and then also we can give you the boundaries of the schools,
Yes, excellent.
That would be
if you
good
don't
too.
have that already. Okay, that'll make for a more fruitful conversation next time, and may inform some of your criteria.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, well,
Thank you,
Believe-
Jonathan. Thank you, Douglas.
Thank you.
Yes, thanks for having us.
Nice to meet
Okay.
you all.
we appreciate it. The meeting is adjourned. Good night.
Oh,
Night.
wait a minute.
Please.
But
Board agenda items.
Board item, upcoming board. items.
Yeah.
I have one to add to the list.
okay,
Okay. Don't see those Zoom things in front of you with that circle, our logo. Okay.
yeah,
Oh, yeah.
We update just the inside, the computer in the middle, a new different kind of beacon, maybe change the book a little. We could get it up and on the trucks. We'd look the same. People would recognize us, but we would be updated. And I'm just throwing that out as an agenda item so we can talk about that, because I think we need to, maybe we want to change the future of America to opportunity or whatever, but we could make some simple changes in that, and we could have an updated logo. So I would
Nice.
like to
I
talk
thought
about that.
somebody at one point had worked. It was either a contest or somebody.
Laura did an
They weren't very
extensive,
good. I looked at them.
Yeah,
It was,
we had a committee look at it and we're
They're
like,
really outdated. I mean,
Plus-
Linda's right. Look at the computer.
why don't we have a brand, and when I see one of our trucks go by, I know it's ours. I know it's not the city of Burlingame. I know what San Mateo's look like. We have a brand. I think we should look at our brand and see what we can do with it.
Well, that sounds like a great, were these student initiated the last time, the committee that I wasn't part
We're
of?
pretty awful. Yeah.
yes.
Maybe beauty is in the eye of the beholder.
Oh.
Gee,
Well,
thanks,
no, I
Bob.
don't know what they look like.
Well, why don't we, I
saying-
think we're gonna have to start over.
Okay.
And that's why I wanted on as an agenda, and we need to get it done. And I don't know if we need a contest. Maybe we just need someone to draw it, like a teacher.
But I think you bring up a good point. Keep the circles and then work on the inside, and that keeps
Yeah,
us
just
continuity.
update our image.
Yeah.
Update the image, but keep kind of the core so you still know it's San Mateo Union High
Then you
School.
know it's us. Yeah.
Yep.
So
Okay, well-
anyway, food for thought.
It's on the list.
Thank you. Good
What
night.
else?
That was it.
No, Leah did. I don't know.
Oh,
Leah,
did
did
you have
you
one?
have
What's
something?
that?
Leah, did you have something? Because you were.
Oh no, that was the last item on the agenda, and so yeah, we have to talk about that because there were some things that were on there, right? So
Yeah.
yeah, I just wanted to make sure that they weren't overlooked.
We got the memorial wall, the
The
consent.
student
agenda,
board member stuff.
Board member stuff that we can talk about.
Our logo.
the student board representative, and now we'll add the logo.
Good.
Anything else?
Let's call it a night.
Thank you.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.